All right, and we will start in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, students. Today I will tell you the difference between an entrepreneur and a businessman. Let's know about this in detail. Are you a businessman or an entrepreneur? Have you ever wondered what the difference between the two is?
Punk ass bitch.
Hey everyone, it's Thursday. It's not November at all. It's January 12th, 2018, actually. And my name's Bobby Frankenberger, and you're listening to episode 34 of the Six World Podcast. The executive producer for today's episode is James O'Neill. Thank you for supporting the show, James. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Cassie Levitt. How's it going, Cassie?
Excellent. Hello, good sir.
I'm doing great, and I hope you are as well. First show of 2018.
Yep.
That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Because I said so.
Okay.
I'm gonna say it's a big deal because we place importance on these kinds of arbitrary dating things. I actually really like the New Year. It's one of my favorite holidays, like New Year's Eve kind of thing, because it's symbolically starting anew. I kind of like that whole thing. But we have a guest, like we always have. He's back for the second time in a long, long time. He was one of our first round of guests very early on in the show, and we had him for corporate stuff because he's our corporate specialist. We have on the show today Guard-a-Manger. How is it going? Welcome to the show.
It's going great. I'm glad to be back. It was like episode 2 or 3 when we talked about as technology.
Yes, it was. That was a really, I remember that episode so well because we thought we could, just nice and neatly wrap up as technology in the short little hour that we had on the episode, and the heady days of the single digit episodes when I thought, I've learned since then.
Hey, just last week, wasn't it just last week or last episode you talked about blood magic again as its own thing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
See, you've continued the theme.
Yeah, exactly.
A new year, a new blood magic.
That's right. Well, we're really glad to have you on the show, especially back for this. And I'm really excited. We're going to be talking about the Villiers family today. We'll not tease that too much more. We'll talk about it, at the main topic. But
I'm going to tease it long enough to say it's the single most important non-awakened group or family in the Sixth World.
That is fair to say, I think, especially after reading a bit about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very fair to say. And let me see. Whoops! Don't play that again.
It fits thematically.
Did you guys hold on, let me actually get what I'm supposed to be getting in here. Did you guys like this deal that I did here?
Punk ass bitch.
You recognize that voice?
No.
That's our good friend Opti.
Punk ass bitch.
On our Head Cases show. No one's safe, right, Cassie? I grab everybody.
Good.
All right, so let's do, make sure I'm doing the right things here, and jump right into, before I forget, new patrons. I actually can't, I was looking back at the new patrons because we did get some, but I couldn't remember, I couldn't figure out if I remembered to do it in the last episode or not. So what I decided is I'm just going to say what all the new patrons we've gotten since the beginning of December, just to make sure I've covered it. And that is Gregg Kern, Greysword, Relative Dimension, I know that guy, Matthew Gilliland, I know him too, and Scott Starks, all new patrons of our show. Thank you guys, thank you very much. And yeah, so not a lot's been going on with me. This is when we'd like to catch up, right? Christmas is over. The holidays are over. We had 2 Christmases. We always have 2 Christmases because we have disparate families. So we had second Christmas since the last show. That was fun.
That sounds almost as good as second breakfast.
Yeah, it's not quite as good as second breakfast. It's just like, all the stresses of Christmas back again, and then but it's fun. The kids love it, and that's why we enjoy it. But it's just a chance to get to hang out with the other half of the family that we didn't get to see. So, fun times. What's been going on with you, Guard-a-Manger?
Oh man, I would say the holidays are crazy. Work is crazy because everybody's got to have that new yen to keep up the sins cost because, oof, that adds up. Haven't been doing a whole lot of Shadowrun online, but I have been doing a bunch of stuff with Sieze the GM, with Zended and Jules, Rainbow Smite. You guys know her.
Yeah, that's a podcast, right?
Yeah, Sieze the GM podcast is a general GMing advice podcast, and I've also been contributing a weekly character write-up. That's the
cool.
card catalog writing. We started with Shadowrun because, well, Shadowrun is love.
Do what you know.
Then we moved into basic D&D, good old Mystara from the 80s and early 90s.
Oh, jeez.
Wow.
It's fun. And then, actually, FASA Games 1879.
Yeah, I've been
They're
seeing
kind
some posts of yours on, I don't know, I guess on, I think it might have been tweets I've been seeing.
Twitter. Yeah.
So.
Well, and the next set's going to start up Tuesday. And by the time this drops, everyone listening is going to get a sneak peek that we're going to do a quick 3-week trip into Doctor Who from the Cubicle 7's most recent story. So that's coming up next for the rest of January.
I've wanted to check out the Doctor Who RPG, tabletop RPG. What is it like?
We actually talked about it a little bit in episode 33 of Sieze the GM. Thank you for the segue. It's really fun, really easy to get into. It's fast and streamlined. It is actually built around narrative-heavy style because it's Doctor Who. The success level is actually yes and, yes, but, no and. That exact kind of improv style we talk about, how to enable people. You can make a character in 20 minutes.
Nice.
It's even more streamlined than Shadowrun Anarchy. And one of the things I most love is the initiative, if there's a conflict, reflects the world of Doctor Who. It doesn't matter what else is happening. If you're a talker, you go first.
Oh, I like that. That's cool.
Then you're a runner, then you're a doer, then you're a fighter.
That's cool. I like how fighters last there. Yeah.
And it reflects the Doctor Who universe.
Yeah.
Unless if you were like me and you grew up on John Pertwee, the third Doctor in Unit, and you remember the Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart 5 rounds rapid. If you have the 5-round rapids trait, you get to go in the doers.
Cool.
If you're fighting, but the talkers still go first because it's Doctor Who.
Right.
You can always talk someone down.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of fun. I recommend it, and I'm going to check and see if anyone's going to run it at Origins this year, and try to sneak a game in, or at least see if Cubicle 7 has a booth set up. They did last year.
Yeah. I'm sure they will again. Another thing that we do together is that if people don't know about it, it's a good opportunity to plug it. Is we actually are in an Earthdawn actual play podcast together, you and I, and
Cassie,
Cassie.
Sometimes I'm
Sort
the
of.
worst one. I have the worst attendance record.
Here's a sneak peek for people. I may have taken control of Azel briefly and ensured that the appropriate level of respect for Randall needed to be paid at one point.
Azel being Cassie's character in there. So.
My warrior.
Yeah.
Yes, warrior. Yes,
Warrior.
yes. Troll warrior.
Troll warrior.
Absolutely not a sky pirate. Is that what it is?
Sky Raider.
Sky Raider.
If you ever get around to it on Sieze's GM and you ever play the Star Trek Adventures game, let me know. I totally want to get in on that.
Yeah.
We've been doing a whole lot of general advice instead of playing, kind of going over topics like what to do if a player can't make it, how to set it up as a GM, how do you handle NPCs, what's a good way to flesh out NPCs quickly on the fly, and kind of helping people who haven't GM'd get more comfortable with it.
Gotcha.
There may be an actual play that Zen is starting up on that feed in the near future.
Maybe.
You should check out siezethegm.com or our Facebook group, or better yet, subscribe to our podcast.
Indeed. And so you're going to be going to Origins, you said, right? The one that I'm constantly becoming more and more jealous that I'm not going to be there.
Yeah, because you are not going, I'm going to be cooking dinners
Because I'm not
for
going. So
other
thank
people
you.
in the Shadowcasters
You're
network.
welcome to everyone.
So yeah, Opti and I think the current plan involves, a carpool with Opti and I driving there. So someone may grab a recorder and record 12 hours of us yammering.
A recorder, like a...
Yep, exactly.
Insert Doctor Who joke here. But yeah, Opti, Rusty Zimmerman, Mr. Johnson, Vox, that's a mini Vox. We're going to do some cooking. We're going to do some fun and kind of stay a little bit away from the convention center so that when we leave, we kind of get some distance.
Yeah.
But looking forward to going back to Origins. And Bobby, I'm sorry you and especially your lovely wife will not make it this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you send your wife at least?
I'll see what I can
She's
do.
awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll send her in my stead. No, I am bummed I'm not going to be able to be there. I won't rehash reasons why, but I've talked about it before. But
1 out of 2 is not bad. I can't make Gen Con. Didn't make it last year. Not going to make it this year. So
Yeah, Origins is more fun. It's fine.
that's my plan. And I'm taking the travel bar with me again.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's let's where'd my mouse cursor go? Let's do a little bit of this.
World News Today.
The only real news that we have is speaking of conventions is that Gen Con badges go on sale on January 14th. That is today's the 12th as of when we're recording this, so that's Sunday. If you're listening to the podcast, then they just went on sale. And so go get the badges. I mean, part of me wants to say, hurry up and get them because they sold out last year. But last year was the 50th anniversary, so, I mean, do you think they're going to sell out?
Probably not.
I
Not
don't-
this early.
I don't think
No,
so.
not
Well,
like-
certainly not this early, but
Yeah,
I don't.
I guess if you wait until June again, like maybe.
Right.
But,
Yeah, I'm kind of with Cassie on this. I don't think they're going to sell out in a snap. It's not it's year 51, and not a lot of people go to prime number events.
Yeah, I don't
So
think they'll sell out probably at all, but definitely not in the next 6 months.
You think at PAX Prime they like the prime number ones? That was a bad joke. Let's ignore it.
Yeah,
The Shadowcasters Network will of course have a panel as we normally do. Well, normally it's a podcaster panel, right? But this year we're gonna kind of rejigger things and rebrand it to be a Shadowcasters Network thing, just for reasons. And I think this year, Cassie, I'm gonna do what you wanted to do last year, which is try to do 2 panels. One of them being a Shadowrun lore panel.
No. I was gonna set that up.
Oh, if you want to set it up, you should do
my
it.
idea. I don't know how to
you're
set
doing a
that up.
Shadowrun lore panel
I
without
don't
me?
know how to set that up.
Okay, now I'm hurt.
Well, if you want to
We
set
had
it
to
up,
pick
you go ahead and do it.
sets.
I thought it was a great idea, and I am not in any great hurry to
Blow it
to be making sure 2 go off. So if you want to do it, you should do it. I just think it should happen.
All right, I may need you to tell me how, but
I
I
will.
I will do it. Then I have to actually go. Damn it.
And his dastardly plan is unveiled.
Yeah. I
Uh,
don't know if we can set one up at Origins. I don't know how that works. Who the getting panels are. And I
Nope,
don't-
you can't. You can't
can't. All right.
have panels at Origins. And if anybody who works for Origins, what is it, Gamma, or is that I don't know, who is listening, which I doubt you are, but I was mad at you last year for like leading me on for months saying, yeah, you could do a panel. That sounds great. And then right at the last minute kind of saying like, yoink, just kidding. You can't do one. What were we thinking? And so that's why we ended up having to like pull some strings with people that we knew, Ray, Regal, and getting them to let us use the Shadowrun game room after hours to do our thing that we had already been telling everyone we were going to do because the guy I talked to said, yeah, go ahead and tell your listeners because it's a thing. Sorry, now I'm mad again.
Breathe in,
Yeah.
breathe out.
Okay.
Breathe in, breathe out.
That's it for news. Do you have, I haven't been following any Origins news because I'm not going. Anything to know about Origins?
I don't have any Origins news. I'm a year older this week.
Congratulations and happy birthday, young lady.
I had no idea. I'm such a bad friend.
That's okay. My boyfriend didn't know either until I reminded him, so it happens.
Well, happy birthday.
My grandma remembers my birthday. She still calls me every year.
I wish I had a noise or something to play on the soundboard. How about I'll just pick a random one.
Big Macs for hand jobs.
How about that one?
All right. Thank you, Adam.
There we go. So happy birthday, Cassie.
Thank you.
Let's for a birthday surprise, let's do this. What is happening? Oh, you probably didn't hear that. My Amazon Echo started talking to me again for some reason. I didn't say her name. That happens. Thanks for the cheers. That apparently isn't working the way it's supposed to, but you guys keep cheering because we love it. And we love that you guys are having fun. So we're going to do some questions. Q&A like we always do on the show. We always have people send us questions on the website. Actually, there's a new place that you can send questions, kind of on the Shadowcasters Network website. Shadowcasters Network oh God. What is wrong with me? Shadowcasters.network/contact. If you go there, you can select the six that you want to contact Six World Podcast and send us your question there. That'll go to the same place as the one from the website. Trying to kind of get everything.
You should set up a Sarah Ha that can get answered on a random Shadowcasters Network podcast, not always this one.
Yeah. Anyway, so send us questions there. You can also email us at the show at sixthworldpodcast.com, or our Twitter handle is at the number 6 World Podcast. So let's answer some question. Mark Perez asks us something. He says, I can't seem to get my head around the Shadowrun universe. Every time I GM it, I sell it as bleak and as a bleak and dismal place. Am I doing it right, or am I going too dark?
I want to hear Joel's responses.
Well, at the end of the day, this answer is, are you having fun playing in that bleak and dismal world? I mean, part of the conceit of the original Shadowrun is rage against the dying of the light. It is bleak when you look at it from the bottom, which is where Shadowrunners are and outside the universe, and it is dystopian, and you should feel like it is dismal and you should fight against it, and that's part of where the anarchy and the punk components of Shadowrun come in. But it's also soul-crushing and numbing, and the greater commoditization of the world as we moved into 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th ed should, to some level, drag on your players, but not on you. You should have fun running it.
Right. And exactly, the fun is really important. You should be enjoying it. Like Chummer Jim in the chat room says, it's not dark or bleak, it's pink with mohawks.
Preferably neon pink.
Yeah, and some people really like that. That's one of my favorite ways to do it. I don't know. I like the dark, dystopian, bleak Shadowrun sometimes, but I often get to a point where I'm like, ugh, man, I need a break from that, like, so, but yeah, I agree with our friend Guard-a-Manger here. What about you, Cassie? What do you think?
I think it's whatever you want to run it as. It's got tons of elements to run it as a full guns a-blazing and dark, like Predator. You can do all the shiny pink mohawks and run it more like a dystopian, but yet action movie, right? And then I'm more of the grim dark person. I like the 40k universe and other such things, so I tend to run it more bleak and dark, and I'm okay with that.
Oh, the Emperor is proud of you.
Right? Yeah.
Well, that's one of the other shifts on editions. Is it's gone from more lethal to less lethal, and I think there is a softening of some of those bleak elements. Now, still dismal, still dystopian, but I think it's easier to be less bleak now because it's a lot easier to not die on a run.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think you're even coming into it with reading Anarchy or a lot of 5th edition. You might not even quite get the full dystopian feel anymore. It feels like it has much more like consumerism and lots of guns that go bang, and I feel like it doesn't really have that bleak and dark dystopian anymore.
Yeah, I agree with agree with Cassie on that assessment. There's just not as much focus on that being a part of the setting. I don't know whether that's for better or worse, or why that is necessarily. But I do agree with that assessment. I think one of the key things about the question, though, is he says every time he plays, every time Mark is playing, he says he sells it as a bleak and dismal place. So the key there is that every time you do it, you seem to be doing it that way. So that must be the way that you perceive it and the way that you enjoy doing it. So go for it.
I think we've all said it. If you're enjoying running it that way, if your players are enjoying trying to buck the system and survive in that absolutely horrible world, then you're doing it right because you're having fun.
Right.
If they're kind of getting burned out on it being dark, it might be time for some pink mohawk. It might be time to go skydiving off of the Grand Canyon while chased by drones with a Panther assault cannon behind you.
Yeah, man. There's an adventure. What's that one adventure? An early and fifth. Oh, geez. You end up if you go one way in it, you can end up like paragliding from some kind of like hotel window into the like 50th floor balcony of like a Brackhaven Investments building or something like that. It's as your infiltration. That's pretty fun. It's like a cool mix of like black trench coat and pink mohawk.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's an appropriately pink mohawk way to trench coat into
exactly.
a building. As a dwarf jumping off of a high rise with a knife between his teeth and a parachute is one of my favorite images in Shadowrun as a dragon flies overhead.
Yeah, and I think once you get onto the roof and everything, there are like these like turreted machine guns and everything too. So it's
yeah,
it's I always like that. So yeah, Mark, do it the way you want to do it. Our next question is from Ross D'Souza. We've been getting a lot of questions from Ross lately, and they're really good questions. He says, if Trid Phantasm was real, would you use that in a tabletop RPG to make sure the players saw the same thing? He says, parenthesized. Personally, I'd go with for no, as tabletop RPGs have a magic that is people's individual imaginations. The magic was inside of you all along.
Such a purist. So what if we didn't use Trid Phantasm, we just used Phantasm? Is that the other one? What's the one that's not 3D, it's just in your mind? I think that one would be acceptable.
The confusion spell.
Illusion.
That's what you're talking about.
No. It's one that's just an illusion spell. The entertainment spell might be it. Trid Phantasm might be the physical. Yeah. Entertainment might be the mental one. I mean, I would, but I use lots of tokens, and I use music and sound effects, and so I'm kind of already doing that without all the hype of actual Trid Phantasm.
That's the way that I see it, Cassie. Like you could think about this as being like, okay, if you have Trid Phantasm, you're like in the world and you're being your character, but I don't see it that way. Like, of course I'd use Trid Phantasm. I use Roll20. It's or another way to think about it is what if it was a way for us to all like virtually sit together even though and see each other face to face if we weren't, or what if it's just a way to say what?
I'm generally with Ross. The magic of tabletop RPGs is in people's individual imaginations. The same way that live theater differs from a movie, that shared experience is filtered through someone's own ideas and head, and what sparks them to be more creative, what sparks them to be more involved, is what they see and not what I as a GM see.
Right.
I wouldn't use it because I want to evoke that through the setting. I want to evoke that through words. I want to evoke that through their imagination, and I think it's more powerful.
Right, but what do you think about having like a soundtrack playing in the background in your tabletop games, you know, like just as ambiance
I have
setting?
I have two Shadowrun soundtracks to switch between, one of which is the pop-heavy consumerist-driven, and one is the punk-heavy, you're probably about to get into a fight.
And that's I would use Trid Phantasm for, is to set the mood, you know?
Yeah, I would say I think theater is even a good example, though, still of like you still using visual aids or sounds and other things. So yeah, maybe not a full immersion, but I would say I'd still use it to like cause some effects to go around.
Yeah, to make fun things happen. Just for like setting the mood, setting the tone of the room. Maybe have like fun like dark swirly things floating around you in a more horror scene or something. I don't know. I would use it. If that's your question, then yes, I would use it. But I guess maybe to answer not a different question, but maybe if you're asking whether we would use it to, like simulate things that were supposed to be happening around the players, I don't think I would do that. I'm more of a theater of the mind type person, which I think is where Guard-a-Manger is coming from, and saying as well. I'm more of a, let it exist in the mind of your players, because there's a lot more that they can do. There might be a lot more that they can do on their own than I can for them, So I'm not a very creative person anyway. So
that's not true at all. Anybody who's watched Complex Action.
Well, thank you. I accidentally was fishing for compliments. I apologize. I don't like to do that.
Yeah, I see what you did there.
Okay, so that's questions. Remember, you can send questions to us at the show at sixthworldpodcast.com, or you can go on to shadowcasters.network/contact. Fill out the form and send us your questions there. We love getting questions. We can never have enough. So do that. Yeah, and let's go here. Okay, time to move on to the main topic of the show, which is the Villiers family. The way I described it was the most important family you may have never heard of in Shadowrun lore. I think if you if you read the fluffy parts of the books, you've probably most certainly heard the name before, right? You think so?
Yeah, I think it would be hard to read a whole lot of Shadowrun to not have heard the Villiers name. You may not realize kind of their depth or importance, but they come up a lot.
Yeah, because this family, in my research, and we're going to dig into some history of it, I'm sure, with Guard-a-Manger. Usually we have to like reel him back in, right? Because he likes to dive deep. But we're gonna talk about the Villiers family goes way back to before 2050, like before when you would be jumping into the Shadowrun world for the first time as a player in first edition. Like they go all the way back to like the 2030s and everything. Like they've been affecting things for a long time in a big way.
Cool. Even by the time the 2030s rolled around, they show up in like what starts the Shadowrun kind of canon. They're already established, right? So you have to imagine they already have a history before that, because they're at kind of the top of their game when that starts, right?
Right.
Around 2030, Richard Villiers is an accomplished corporate raider and businessman, an entrepreneur, if we go back to what we were talking about. He predates the corporate court, and actually we're going to see about how he shaped its entire form. And his soon-to-be wife and then ex-wife and now widow, Samantha Villiers, actually worked with Echo Mirage. So you have from the get-go people involved in the most influential components of the Sixth World, and they are fascinating.
Now, and Echo Mirage, for those who might not know, Echo Mirage was basically the Matrix team that I always get this wrong and explain it in an awkward way. So briefly,
they were the first cyber commandos. They were the people the U.S. government tapped as the crazy bunch of specialists to use prototypes to fight the crash virus that was eating the internet from the inside out. And somehow they won after a 90% attrition rate.
Right, and the technology that they used to do this became cyberdeck technology, right?
Exactly. It's a direct line. Here's where we are introduced to the Villiers in lore. Two of the surviving members of Echo Mirage formed a company to try to create the first cyber deck. They were taking it from terminal to deck size. Ken Roper and Michael Eld. And it was called Matrix Systems. And the prototype was called the Portal, and Villiers saw a demonstration and wanted to buy in. But they only let him buy in 49%. He didn't get a controlling share.
Okay.
And this is where you begin to see why they matter. Both Ken and Michael died in accidents not long after this. Now, some people will tell you the government...
these quote-unquote accidents?
these are, in fact, quote-unquote accidents.
Okay, air quote
Richard
accidents.
Villiers may be the first recorded Johnson in Shadowrun history. Now, some will tell you the government killed them to keep that information from trying to get out, but the problem is Richard Villiers came out of this with a copy of the specs. The two people he just tried to buy into who said, no, we want to keep control, died, and he kept the specs when he saw the future of the Matrix, and with that, parlayed himself into a 1/3 ownership of what would become Fuji.
Yeah, and that's a really big deal. That's a name that everyone should recognize as Fuji.
The first major cyber AAA is Fuji, and that's why they were on the head of the hardware for so long. Why Renraku was always software and Fuji was always hardware was 1/3 of their ownership came in with the literal blueprints of what became the Matrix. And he did that probably by having the two people he just butted with killed in accidents.
Right. So he used the fact that he had this technology from Matrix Systems as like his bargaining chip to get in with Fuji, right?
That plus his personal wealth. He already was supremely wealthy and an immensely successful corporate raider. Remember
and so am I right in I always imagined what he did before all this. I always imagined him as being like Richard Gere in Pretty Woman. Yeah, he just he bought and sold corporations, and that's how he made his fortune.
That's a really good example.
Yeah.
When Shadowrun came out, he is pretty much the archetype of the 80s corporate raider.
Right.
He and his company would buy a company, sell off components that weren't profitable, streamline it, and be a bit what we call venture capitalists today.
Right.
And he was really good at it until 2033 when he ended up in Matrix Systems and became amazingly good at it by becoming 1/3 of Fuji.
Right. So this guy he's really good at seeing, the bigger picture and restructuring, reorganizing, and making a company, better, or at least worth more.
Well, and on this note, I think one of the reasons that his family then becomes so interesting and a good one to know throughout the lore of all the editions is because they're the ones you can sometimes touch, right? You'll encounter Samantha and Richard occasionally, or at least say maybe your Johnson's side. So the great thing that he may have taken over this company or got the shares because he hired Shadowrunners to do this, in effect become the first corporate Johnson, is it continues in all these different editions. There's probably at least one adventure, I think, in every edition where you're hired by the Villiers, or right,
Yeah.
at least
one,
right?
Well, as we'll find out, even his daughter was even formerly a Shadowrunner. So
his daughter was a Shadowrunner. Samantha was, I think, was Samantha who was in charge, perhaps, of Shadow Assets, or Darren was, maybe?
Both of them.
No, yeah, Darren
Both
was,
of them,
but
well.
yeah. Well, and Samantha was directly involved with the Echo Mirage. She was brought in by David Gavilan, who she confirms as Damian Knight. She's the one who actually officially put it into the canon that, no, this is the actual connection. Yes, Gavilan is Knight. And it's an absolutely... That was one of the biggest jaw-drop moments I had in the Seattle box set, was Samantha's comlink specifically saying Damien brought her into Echo Mirage.
Yeah.
That was a 25-year mystery finally confirmed. And she was there from the get-go. But now, moving on through the fun of Villiers and the fact that he's part of the first 8 megacorps. Remember, back in the day, there were only 8. In my day, when we still had to use wires to connect to the Matrix, there were only 8 AAAs, young'uns. And he formed his relationship with Miles Lanier. And he's not a Villiers, but you can't talk about Richard and Samantha without Miles, because he's integral to the Villiers maneuver and is effectively part of the family. And he ran Fuji Security, a former UCAS sniper. a man who is precise and who may be Richard Villiers' only friend, became someone who not only ran shadow assets, but was behind keeping shadow assets from getting to Fuji goods. He's the one who set up how Fuji protected themselves, and Richard leaned on him greatly. And when he doesn't have him, that's going to be an issue.
Right. So
for those of you wondering if we convert him to 5th ed stats, Lanier probably throws about 30 dice on his sniping shots with the best tech you're going to see. So yeah, he's on the level of don't mess with him.
And he's CFD infected.
And cured.
Well, yeah, he has been cured. But that's
yes,
getting...
I converted his stats to 5th ed in my head, but that's because I need help.
Professional. So we're getting into a big part, and I promise we're not gonna like go through year by year with these guys, but there are some big points in the history. I mean, we are talking about the Villiers family, and you mentioned it, the Villiers maneuver. So Richard Villiers was part of Fuji, and it's pretty clear that he had quite an ulterior motive of becoming, you know, a part owner of or involved with Fuji. I mean, he had some nasty plans in mind.
I'd say, yeah, how soon they manifested, we don't know, but the Villiers maneuver is the best long con in the Sixth World history. For those of you who don't know, there was this great dragon called Dunkelzahn. Dunkelzahn got elected president. And
a dragon as a president?
Inconceivable. On the night of his inauguration, he was killed in an explosion in his car, and they had to read his will. In his will, he gave Miles Lanier 2% of Renraku's stock. Let that sink in. The director of Fuji Security now owns 1/50th of Renraku.
Yeah. Strange.
More than a little bit. And what you see is Miles Lanier leaves, goes to work for Renraku, but suddenly there's a shadow war between Fuji and Renraku, and it seems like Fuji assets are getting the best of Renraku, and they're really unhappy and think that Lanier's using insider trading. And so in 2059, they bring a case in the corporate court.
Right. So it's, I don't want to glaze over that. Like it looks like from the surface, it looks like Miles Lanier went over to Renraku and was exploiting what he knew about Fuji to be successful in Renraku, and is basically causing a lot of harm to Fuji.
Yes, and there were all sorts of recriminations and what's going on, and he and Villiers hadn't spoken, and...
Right, because they were good friends, and he's like a traitor, right?
Except for some Shadowrunners occasionally making deliveries of random objects to a bar in Boston. By the way, we should mention that both Lanier and Villiers are huge Red Sox fans.
Very important to know that.
Very important to know that, because, you know, Richard Villiers actually has a World Series Red Sox ring in a book that was written before the Sox won the World Series. So, once again, fiction was prescient. And in the corporate court ruling, Miles Lanier is forced to sell his stock in Renraku at below par value, basically tanking Renraku's value because 1/50th of its value was just sold for less than 1/50 of its value. Mm-hmm. And he immediately jumps back in with Villiers. And this is part of White Monday, with Villiers' stock already running low. Renraku's stock already running low. Villiers starts liquidating his Fuji stock.
Right.
Now, Shiawase and Renraku immediately start grabbing at this and trying to fight back. And in the process of this, as Fuji's stock plummets, and then Renraku's stock plummets because they're in all sorts of a bidding war, Villiers separates himself from Fuji because he'd been quietly using LLCs and offshore companies to buy up a bunch of companies, including JRJ International, and create this new mega corporation called Novatech.
Right. And JRJ International is very important. Don't forget that name.
JRJ International is one of the first 8 members of the corporate court.
Right. They helped found it, which is one of the big reasons why the Villiers family stays relevant, right? Because they have the golden ticket. Whoever's
the eight corporations originally members are always members.
right.
They get what's called a golden ticket, and it's actually the Villiers' fault we even have that, because in forming Novatech, Fuji tried to get their seat back from JRJ.
Mm-hmm.
They tried to make an argument, and the corporate court actually had to make the decision that no, JRJ holds the seat, not Fuji. And so the entire concept of a golden ticket, what's going to be his downfall and potentially saving grace, is his own fault.
Right. So what
You two guide me, because I can just sit here and babble for an hour and a half.
to kind of wrap up the Villiers maneuver part, what we kind of have is that you saw this going back and forth with Miles Lanier, causing Renraku stock to plummet and then Fuji stock to go down. It made it so that they were kind of at each other's throats, distracted, and it enabled the rise of Novatech, right?
Correct. Novatech came about at the same time Cross Global. It's one of the great expansions of the corporate court era. And it's basically third edition, for those of you trying to date where we are in the editions in history.
Right.
Novatech's third edition. And they are a Matrix heavyweight. Both Catco and Novatech were Matrix heavyweights and undercut the Japanicorp's traditional dominance in that. Yes, Tom David, the ultimate Yojimbo maneuver. That's a good way of putting the Villiers maneuver. In the end of third ed, we're going to skip ahead. We're going to skip through the fun. We're going to skip through the fact that, the daughter he had tried to kill his ex-wife under the psychotropic control of a European cult in the middle of all of this.
Yeah, maybe we'll touch on that when we talk about his daughter a little bit later.
That's a less important, less interesting part of the Villiers family to me. Cue laughter. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In the end of third ed, we're moving into Crash 2.0.
Yes.
And part of what enabled Crash 2.0 was Novatech was having an IPO, an initial public offering. Richard Villiers needed more capital, more liquidity in Novatech, and so he was actually going to open up selling shares of a AAA on the stock market.
Right.
That required a big upgrade of the stock market servers. They're getting ready for this. This is absolutely awesome. And it's also where Deus is going to try to apotheosize into the god of the internet. Deus being the great AI that is trying to pretty much eat everything out there and was in the Renraku arcology. And we can have a whole nother episode about the Renraku arcology and Deus.
Right.
But the reason that Villiers is on the ropes goes back to the same reason he has Novatech, Dunkelzahn's will. Dunkelzahn gave a huge load of Nuyen to this guy called Art Dankwalter. And Art had been wronged by Fuji, and Art took it personally, and with this sudden infusion of billions of Nuyen, because of compound interest and 2 gold coins that Dunkelzahn borrowed from his ancestors several millennia ago, Dankwalter started eating companies and started making surgical strikes against Novatech and trying to make Villiers hurt in the same way. And so he needed money, because Novatech was kind of cobbled together from a bunch of assets. It was an umbrella corporation made up of little corporations that didn't always work well together, and this is a recurring theme. Villiers is a survivor, but he does it by improvisation rather than planning.
Sure.
Which is powerful. And so in the process of needing to open up money, Villiers creates the conditions in which Deus attempts to apotheosize into what may be one of the first uber sprites of what we would call them now, at the same time that Winter Knight tries to crash the global matrix, leading to Crash 2.0.
So that IPO, that initial public offering of Novatech, led to that because of the reasons you just said. Did people know that? Like, we know that, but did people like the corporate court or anything, did they know that? Like, I guess I was trying to lead to, is he ever found at fault for anything? But I guess he isn't it's not his
Not
fault.
for this. No, with Winter Night and Daves, couldn't really blame him. But he did manage to blame a whole lot on Art Donkwalter, because in the middle of all of this, they get to fire a Thor shot on a single human being. The corporate court,
Sounds like
because
overkill.
of Villiers. Yeah, no. It is an appropriate response to someone who has managed to cause the downfall of a AA corp and is nibbling at the edges of a AAA corp and effectively acting contrary to all corporate court mores. So you know what they did? They dropped a large piece of mass on him from orbit, and it went boom. He also made phone calls in the middle of all of this and merged.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
He merged with Erica and Transist Neuronet in the middle of all of this. He creates another AAA corporation. Make this the third if you're keeping count. Out of this by merging with the companies in Europe who actually were already on the verge of the wireless revolution. He had been talking with them because, again, he saw a cyberdeck and saw what was coming with the Matrix and got into Fuji. He jumped out of Fuji and made a Matrix-heavy company, seeing where it went. He partnered with the people who had the technical know-how but not the infrastructure to deploy wireless internet. And Fourth Ed opens with NeoNet. Novatech, Erica, Transist Neuronet. See the net? One of the AAAs and one of the biggest corporations. That is where Richard Villiers is fantastic. And I want to thank Unexiled because he subscribed with Twitch Prime to the Shadowcasters Network.
Thanks.
And that is a fantastic thing to see.
Absolutely it is. Now, my question, did he really create another one? Like NeoNet, he didn't really create, like, it was just a merger, right?
Well, when you look at mergers, you got to think about how it's structured. And we're going to talk about that in what I call the Villiers Maneuver Mark II in a few minutes.
All right.
I've taken about 100 words or so that were written by a fantastic writer in Dark Terrors, and I think I figured out exactly what happened. And
Would that be Brooke Chang that wrote that?
That would be Brooke Chang's fantastic work on exactly what happened in Dark Terrors at the end of all the fun CFD stuff.
All right.
We're going to see if they're listening and if I'm right in future books, because
Well, and her writings in Dark Terrors is what kind of spurred this episode, because we liked what she wrote there and the story that was being told. And like, we need to start with the Villiers first if we want to go further into this. Yeah.
It's Shakespearean. It's like Lear. It's like Hamlet. You have hubris and power that causes a rise and a fall, all based on their own mistakes. And it is absolutely a classic story. And I think that Brooke did a great job showing that and capping it off. But NeoNet.
Yes. NeoNet. Those jerks.
We're familiar with the NeoNet. They're fantastic. They're great. They are cobbled together and infighting and have trouble actually figuring out what foot to stand on, because into all of this mix you have Villiers. You have his ex-wife Samantha, who still goes by Villiers, running Shadow Ops out of Seattle, one of the hubs of Shadow operations. You have the Great Dragon Keladir, and that's where things get interesting, but that's a whole nother episode before we dig into exactly what happens in creating the monads and CFD and all that stuff.
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot. We're actually gonna any mention of the CFD stuff, we're gonna glaze over it. We've talked about it. NeoNet
Long story
did that,
short,
sure.
there are horrible evil nanites that take over your body based on egos that Keladir was trying to use to bring back his friend who was the Eliohan, the only dragon who ever got a cyber deck implant, a data jack, who was in the Matrix during Crash 2.0, which means it's all Villiers' fault anyway, to bring him back so that the egos neurosis wasn't the only thing left of his friend who was a dragon.
Right, and if you want to know more, episode 25 of our podcast, we did CFD. So
episode 25. Sixth World Podcast. Fantastic. I listened. It was great. And so we're going to gloss over most of Fourth Ed. We're going to gloss over to the end of Fourth Ed and move into Fifth, because we just got into CFD and Monads and the Boston lockdown. Because right. NeoNet is based in Boston. Remember the Red Sox fans?
Yes.
Where are they going to put their home base?
Of course, in Boston, where the NeoNet Tower is located.
And for those of you listening along at home, the CFD outbreak includes a strain that has
Deus.
Part of Deus in Boston, causing zombie CFD outbreaks that makes everybody shut them down and put a wall up around it. Because Richard Villiers tried to make money.
Right. So Richard Villiers was what exactly is his? Because again, we're not going to talk about CFD in particular, but this whole episode is key into why he is no longer like in control of Neonet.
And that's what we're getting to. The Boston lockdown, the loss of a major metroplex, the absolute loss of dollars and life that people in Boston had were attributed to multiple companies. But chief among them was Neonet. And when the nation states actually sued in the corporate court over this, the corporate court agreed not just Neonet was at fault, but Richard Villiers was grossly negligent as the CEO in overseeing the projects that led to the CFD outbreak.
Their argument being that, I think specifically the argument was that that one of two things had to have happened from him to make this happen. Either he's terrible at his job, or he was somehow complicit.
The language they used in that order was grossly negligent, which for lawyers out there is a pretty big hurdle. Or here's the big thing that hurt him in a corporate court. He breached his fiduciary duty to the company. By agreeing or not overseeing what they did, he allowed the company to lose this much money. And so not only is he having to pay damages, not only are there huge bills that Neonet is on the line for, and really Evo, but Evo's at fault, but that's a whole different story, but Neonet's taken the fall. Richard Villiers is barred from holding a position of authority on any company overseen by the corporate court. He cannot be an officer or a member of the board of directors on any company the corporate court oversees, which means A, AA, or AAA.
And that's, a big deal.
That's a huge deal because Richard Villiers has just spent 30 plus years, 50 years in the midst of the corporate court and the AAAs, and now he can't even have a say in how a single A corporation runs. But now for the fun stuff. Now where we think about what's going forward.
All right, hold on. I'm going to stop you for a second because I'll have to. I'm going to mark the audio to take this part out because my daughter is woke up, and because we're Friday, my wife's not here, so I got to jump up, and I'll be right back.
Okay, so while he's paused and marking the audio, the reason we're recording on Friday is that Bobby and Cassie were both nice enough to not record on Thursday because that's when we record Sieze the GM. And if you've been listening, you know how excited I am to talk about Villiers and corporate goodness and 3 different AAAs. And so, yeah, they were nice to me. It's my fault.
No, thank you for joining us.
Ooh, but we're about to get into fun. Like I said,
Yes.
Villiers Maneuver Mark II. I actually was like, wait, I know what this is. I know what they did. I figured
I'm excited to hear this.
I'm resisting the urge to go make another old-fashioned while he is dealing with his child because I don't have children.
I know. That means we can drink late at night like adults and have ice cream for dinner.
I was going to say, it means we can start earlier. He has to wait for the kids to go to sleep.
Oh, right, yeah. No, I don't usually start before 8 o'clock now. It's more like dinner time, and then I go to bed by 10.
All right, now I'm curious because we are now discussing whiskey in the chat, and that is always one of those things that I actually spent like an hour talking about at lunch yesterday.
I think all I have in the house is whiskey and a beer. I drank all the vodka, so I'm good.
Despite my attempts to keep my home bar down to a reasonable number, I'm afraid I've gone back up to about 65 bottles in the home bar.
Oh my god. We have one in the freezer, and we don't actually keep any more than that because I will day drink if I'm left alone.
All right, I'm back.
I was
sorry
down
about
to
that.
50 bottles when we moved, and then, yeah.
All right, I'm gonna mark us back in. I should have warned you guys ahead of time that I'm home alone with the kids, so that may happen again. Just
as long as you know there aren't sudden paint cans that we see swinging down on ropes into frame, I think we'll be okay.
Is that what the purring noise is? Is it your baby monitor?
No, that is coming from Guard-a-Manger's line.
Right. You have a cat.
Yes, but the dread cat Thulu is nowhere near me, so I'm not sure what's buzzing.
Okay, never mind. I
All right.
swear I hear perk.
Gonna mark
I
us
believe you.
in right here. All right, we're back. Sorry, I had to take care of kid stuff. But we're back in. So Neonet is.
Neonet's no more.
Yeah, Neonet's no more. Villiers is no longer able to hold a position in any of import.
Yeah, from A corporations up, he's out. But what he did was he got the best golden parachute ever.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's happening is right now he and Johnny Spinrad are playing chicken with each other's lifespans.
Right. Yeah. So this is where JRJ International comes back in, because it's also a big deal that he can't hold a position like that because of JRJ International and the golden ticket that they hold, which means that he has no place in the corporate court if he can't be, head of.
Yeah, he can't have that position. Now
Right.
he can still own it. They didn't force him to sell it.
Right.
But what he did, and I think I've figured it out because we've got two transactions. So for everyone listening along at home, go buy Dark Terrors. Brooke Chang did a fantastic job writing up the CFD and Monad section, including the end of Neonet and the fall of another AAA at the hands of Richard Villiers. But what we had was only a brief quarter page on what happened and how, at the end of it, it came out looking like Johnny Spinrad had control of, or had been leased, the golden ticket of JRJ International to have a seat on the corporate court, which he's been wanting since the 2050s, but those silly illegal experiments in Portugal with humans kind of delayed it, and he's been trying to build it back, but that's a whole other episode. We can get into that some other time. So what I think happened are I think the Villiers Maneuver Mark II was two different transactions executed simultaneously. Because working from what we know of Richard Villiers owning 100% of JRJ International personally, and Johnny Spinrad wanting a seat on the corporate court, meaning he needs JRJ. There's a small window to execute this before the corporate court's order, before the mandate is issued and the corporate court's order goes into effect. So the first thing that happens is Spin Global buys JRJ. But the way they do it is what's fun, because they buy JRJ in two parts. First, they buy about 40% of JRJ by taking a loan out from JRJ. This is basically a corporate inversion. If you've heard that word come up in the current news, in modern fifth world life, basically we're doing a modified corporate inversion where Spin Global takes out a loan from JRJ to buy it in the form of about 40% of the stock or so. So we'll say if Villiers had 100 points of stock, that JRJ takes out a loan that equals 80 points of stock in JRJ. And at the same time, in this corporate inversion plan on a loan, remember those 80 points go on a loan, flat out buys about 11% from Villiers straight up. Now, Villiers gets a huge influx of immediate cash from selling 11% of even a discounted golden ticket company. And Spin Global has a seat on the corporate court by now controlling 50.5% of JRJ. That 50.5% of it, 40% is bought on a loan, which they are now repaying to JRJ International, which is owned 49.5% by Richard Villiers, who gets the payout and distribution every year as one of the two owners of that company. Now, if the maturation date on that is 10 years, which matches how long the corporate court says that Richard Villiers can't be an owner or a board of director or an officer, you have a game of chicken between two of the biggest corporate raiders in the sixth world, where by paying interest solely on that loan, Johnny Spinrad is betting and banking he's going to outlive Richard Villiers and be able to not have to call in the assets, while Richard Villiers is banking he's going to live at least 10 years and be able to call in the default moment when the balance and principal hasn't been paid on that loan and retake control of JRJ and take away the golden ticket.
But aren't they both just rich enough to get landization forever?
Well, I was just trying to think. Like, Villiers has to be in his 80s or 90s, right?
Oh yeah, he has got to be in. If I remember when he was he is actually in his late 70s.
Okay. He's younger than I thought he was.
No, yeah, he
Still.
started real early on that corporate rating.
Yeah.
And yeah, Todd David's making the point that if this is what happens, you have this amazingly rich universe of Shadowruns between Villiers and Spinrad.
Yeah.
We're banking and playing chicken on which of us is going to live longer because I have better assets. And the reason why Richard Villiers is making that bet is Miles Lanier came back to work with him. The reason why Johnny Spinrad's making that bet is because, well, he's Johnny Spinrad.
So that brings
He's no
us
words with a martini.
That brings us up to date with Richard Villiers. Now, so he's a mover and a shaker and a planner, and as you said, he's very good at improvising in these situations.
That's why I think he flat out sold about 10 or 11% of JRJs for immediate capital to hire Shadowrunners off the grid with certified cred sticks. He's got ongoing liquidity, but I think he's using that. I think he did that big sale to start going after Evo while he's fending off Johnny Spinrad. But the thing is, the Villiers family isn't just Richard with Miles as a friend. We got to look at Samantha and Darren. We've got to look at the fact that there are still other Villiers in play.
Yeah,
well,
no
Samantha,
doubt.
not so much.
Right.
Samantha was well. Let's talk about Samantha. So Samantha was Villiers' wife for a while, but after that, they did get a divorce, but they were still pretty close for a very long time, and they worked very closely together.
And
Yeah.
It's worth noting they did have a daughter together,
Mhm.
and they were very similar mindsets and continued playing the games together even long after their divorce.
And that's part of why they got married and then got divorced and then still hung out together, is they're really, really similar. And Caroline's supposed to be really similar to her mother, which Oz just points out in the chat. But yeah, Samantha was involved in Echo Mirage. She knew Damian Knight when he was still David Gavilan. And what she did for a long time was VP of Fuji, and then Novatech, and then Neonet. And she was in charge of the North American territory, including Seattle. And
Right.
one of the things one of my favorite things is she looked at and tried to buy Renraku in the middle of Crash 2.0. She was sitting there going, well, wait, tech's crashing? The whole internet's crashing? Maybe we can buy Renraku, and then I can have my own AAA to kind of joust with Richard. And it's a bunch of side adventures in the middle of Stormfront that you can use as optional prompts for your runners. But she kind of butted heads a lot in late Neonet days with Richard because she was favoring an Asian expansion. She really saw the rise of Wuxing and the Japanicorps kind of getting back together as friends as where they needed to kind of cut it off. And so she was making a big play in Asia through the second half of 4th edition as Neonet was rapidly moving towards its final dissolution. And that's where some of the most fun for her is. But unfortunately, I must stop a moment and pour out a brief pour for Samantha Villiers.
Yeah. In 2077, she died of scare quotes natural causes.
Hard targets.
Right.
She was a mark from Hard Targets and was confirmed killed based on one of the contracts in Hard Targets. And her comlink shows up as part of the basis for the Seattle box set, which again has two of the biggest jaw-dropping, we're confirming something from 30 years ago of lore that I have ever had, and so it makes me happy.
So she was that's kind of her story, and to put a cap on it, I guess she was really, like, it should not be understated how good she was at her job, and just she's often compared to her ex-husband, former husband Richard Villiers, as being, you know, able to run with him just as well in terms of being able to affect things at that
Charming,
level.
ambitious, utterly ruthless. She was as good, as powerful, as smart as Richard, and just kind of took a subtler approach to it.
Right, and that's what made them such a powerful duo.
If you ran between 2050 and 2070 in Seattle, you ran for Samantha Villiers at some point. Period. End of sentence. Usually through Darren, her brother-in-law, but she paid you at some point.
Right.
It's a great question. So somebody collected on the hard targets bounty. Was it anyone canon?
Not that I've seen. We haven't seen any confirmation of who actually pulled the shot yet.
Yeah.
I've been looking. I went and did research and double-checked, and I actually went and caught up on books I had not bought from Catalyst just for this, because I'd been playing a bunch of Earthdawn and writing other stuff.
Right.
So yeah, no, Todd, David in the chat, I looked, and I have not seen any actual in-canon confirmation of who collected the payday.
Now, the two of them together had a daughter, Caroline. And she was born in 2033, so what does that make her now? About 45.
I think we hit 2080, so 47.
We're in 2080, yeah.
We're in 2080?
Yeah.
Yes,
Jeez,
New
man.
Year, 2080.
Can't keep...
Yeah, it's
Can't
based
keep-
on real time, more or less.
I know, I can't keep real time straight.
Look at the banner for the Emerald Grove.
I was rounding down, so I guess she's 46,
Okay.
47. When's her birthday? But
Well,
anyway.
she was daughter to the two of them, and you can imagine growing up around that environment. She probably picked up a lot of, tricks of the trade.
she did, but first she rebelled. Like any good kid, she didn't want any of it.
Right, because her
And
parents,
actually-
despite her parents probably spending lots and lots of time and attention on her, that's a joke. She was probably neglected horribly, and so she rebelled and started running the shadows under the name Rouge.
Well, and this is after she tried to kill her mother based on psychotropic manipulation from a European cult.
Yeah, right. In Germany, right?
Yeah, in Germany, and that's from some of the novels, and some of the old novels really kind of flesh it out, and it's a lot of fun. And she lost the use of her hand. So
Is that the White Pawn? Something White Pawn?
I think so.
Or
I'll have to
the
double check.
Knight's Pawn?
Knight's Pawn.
Knight's Pawn.
Knight's Pawn, yeah.
But she came back to the fold, and the reason why you need to pay attention to Caroline, is yes, Oz is correct. Oz just answered why you need to pay attention to her. She came back to run Seattle's NeoNet Shadow Ops.
Right.
And now she is the head of Novatech. She is the president of Novatech, which has not yet been bumped down from a AAA, but we know it will be, which holds control over Matrix backbone and technology with a headquarters in St. Louis.
And by Novatech, you mean NeoNet.
Well, no, I mean Novatech.
Yeah, Novatech's going to be...
NeoNet is in the process of dissolution. Erica and Transys are both in the process of extricating themselves from the parent company.
Oh, okay.
She literally took her father's spot as president of Novatech, which maintains its Matrix components.
Yeah, that's a key bit of the information I had missed, is that there are those parts are splitting up, and Novatech's sort of like, quote unquote, coming back in a way, and then getting kicked out.
Yeah, and Malmstein is looking at an African expansion. You're seeing a whole lot of growth in that area, but that's, again, non-Villiers. And we'll come back to that in another episode. She's now the president of what will be a minimum an A corporation that has a disproportionate amount of control and ability in the Matrix.
Yeah, because they're still. I mean, NeoNet was the guy, the dudes.
They were the non-European wireless king.
Yeah,
Well,
and so
SK
presumably
wrapped
Novatech will still be, right?
Well, and they always had the best tech. Maybe Cross in a few places, but generally Novatech had the best in 4th Ed as far as hardware.
Right.
And so what you're looking at is, if you want high-end R&D in Matrix Ops, you're looking at Novatech more than anybody else. And she's nasty and mean and ambitious and ruthless and absolutely everything you expect from a Shadowrun CEO.
Yeah. Learned from the bests.
But Richard had brothers too. You didn't think
Yeah.
it was just going to be Richard this whole time. Again, they're reining me in. They're keeping me from going too far.
Right. He's doing a good job, and he's moving on.
I'm moving on fast. I'm trying to cut this down.
Yeah.
Because
his younger brother, the important one that we're going to talk about, is Darren. We've already mentioned him, Darren Villiers.
He had
You might
another
mention
brother,
Martin
Martin
first.
Villiers. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
Martin's
really?
got a smaller spot. So
Okay.
Martin is a fantastic human being, a really good guy who was a really wonderful philanthropist who's believed to have been in Boston when the lockdown happened and is probably dead because of Richard's own greed. So, moving on to Darren,
In this whole family, Martin is the one good guy.
who died
Definitely dead
in
now.
Boston because of Richard.
That's what
Yeah.
happens. Good guys always finish last.
Darren's a dwarf, the only dwarf in the entire family. He is also an adept, the only magically active member of the Villiers family we're aware of. He is initiated, I believe, at least 3 grades from what we know.
That's the
And
last
he was-
official, like, what we heard. I mean, it's possible, I guess, he's initiated.
He's
beyond
probably at 4th or 5th now, but we'll get to why.
that.
in
It's
a minute.
neither here nor there, really. But
Yeah, he ran Shadow Ops. He was probably the Johnson for Richard Villiers when you were in Seattle in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
Through Fuji, through Novatech, through Neonet. Then he went over to work for Neonet Asia. You see him and Samantha working together, agreeing on this and backing it. But the interesting thing that happened before the end of Neonet is he backed Keladir and became a member of the Knights of Rage, and is falling in with the dragon, which is part of why I think he probably went up another initiate grade or 2. But Darren is a very powerful dwarven adept who knows the corporate in and outs and shadow work, who is now working directly for Keladir and the Knights of Rage. Do you have a more frightening person who might decide to hire you or possibly hunt you in the scope of a dragon's employment?
Well, and it's worth mentioning too that before he did all that, he was essentially a hands-on operative, right? So he eventually has experience sort of doing shadow runs, much like Caroline does, right?
Oh yeah. He's one of those Johnsons who would look at you and go, well, you have 90% of the skill set, but you need someone to do this. I'm doing that. You get a 10,000 new yen bonus if you keep me alive. And
it's not really a bonus, is it? Because, I mean, you wouldn't get
No,
paid
but
if he died anyway.
It's fun because he's again another character that you might actually run into and work with and see. So he's something that you can play and touch with.
Yeah.
yeah, he's literally the Villiers you're most likely to have met, because he's literally the Johnson or the person the Johnson says, this is actually my boss, but I'm not telling you that, and you have to take him on the mission to actually plant the explosives because he's the only one who knows where they have to go in this facility.
And so, yeah, that's... I'll save that for in just a minute. Keep going.
Well, and that's Darren in a nutshell. He is
Right.
a fanatical dwarf who is extraordinarily loyal to his family, and in the last 2 years, that family has shifted from Samantha and Richard to Keladir in joining the Knights of Rage. And so he is probably going to sell it like a convert. And if you have a dwarf physad hiring you, be aware that it may well be Darren Villiers.
Well, that's the best part about bringing in Caroline and Darren is they're younger and now we're gonna have a lifespan that can go for another 3 editions of Shadowrun, right? We're like,
Well, okay, yeah, from a writing standpoint,
yeah,
transitioning to Caroline and Darren means we get the Villiers for longer. That means whenever 6th Ed happens, we're probably going to have Richard die off stage. I mean, in all fairness, he's probably going to suffer the fate of someone like Cross and die between editions. But by 6th, that means Caroline is going to be the preeminent Villiers. And Darren is going to be the one doing her dirty work. Maybe Caroline will team up with Keladir.
which I think is perfect though because like especially for somebody like you who's played the game for so many years, that means you've gotten to watch like Caroline and Darren like progress story-wise, right? Where Richard kind of came into it with a story and then did some things while he was here. Like these guys have kind of grown up in it, you know?
Yeah, Richard spent most of the 1st and 2nd edition being a cardboard cutout in a double-breasted suit from the 80s. And love it.
Gere.
Yeah, pretty much. Actually, yeah, pretty much. Richard Gere in Pretty Woman, that double-breasted suit, that exact kind of demeanor, that's Richard Villiers. Caroline and Darren have had growth and change, and it is fun to watch. And for those of you listening along at home, do you see why us old fogies love the Villiers?
Yeah. So that's it feels like, we went on a whirlwind path through
We went from
through
the
the
Crash
history.
Virus to CFD. We went through 3 different AAAs plus the possible rise of others. We had 4 different other show topics mentioned,
Right.
all in the span of a
Well, and
40-minute
that's
discussion
why-
of one family.
Right, and that's why again these guys are a big deal because they touch like every, obviously not literally every,
Do
but
you use the Matrix? Do you use the Matrix in Shadowrun? You have been touched by the Villiers. You have a cookie on your comm link that is the fault of Richard Villiers and Matrix Systems.
yeah. So, what else is there? So we want to, we're getting towards the end of the talk about the Villiers. I want to touch on Cassie. Let me hear what you have to say. Like, what is the big thing that you like about them, or something that we didn't talk about, or something? What is the takeaway that you want people to have about the Villiers?
I think we talked about it, but I think the best thing about the Villiers is because they are canon big shot characters who you can interact with and talk. You're very unlikely to meet Damian Knight. Perhaps.
Damian Knight doesn't get drunk in a bar.
Right, yeah.
Richard Villiers does.
Richard Villiers does, or there's a chance you ran with Caroline or Darren at some point. These are people you can touch and play with and enjoy in a game, and that's why I think they're a lot of fun.
What about you, Guard-a-Manger? What is it that you want people to, if you had to make people know one thing about the Villiers, or really drive one point home why these guys are so important, or why you love them so much, what is it?
They touched every single part of what makes the Sixth World the Sixth World, and in 2080 to 2085, you have a family with billions of new yen, both on the mega corporate side and the shadow asset side, with grudges that they plan to prosecute.
Oh, one thing we didn't talk about, just because NeoNet is dying, now there's going to be way more Sinless, so come out the people who need
how it's shaking out on the Sins is one of those open questions. So more Sinless. Richard Villiers wants to go after Evo. Caroline is going to be protecting herself, and she's kind of an aggressive person. Darren Villiers is going to help Kellidir solidify his authority, and Samantha's comlink is out there with a whole lot of data that didn't need to get out. So the next 5 years, the Villiers family, even the dead ones, are going to shape the shadows and the rest of the world.
Yeah, and I think my takeaway is basically what Cassie said. You guys who have been listening to Six World Podcast for a while know that I say all the time that I love it when I love the stories. I love digging into the big characters, right? And these guys, this family are people that in the course of you playing as players, your player characters get to interact with, and they're big effing deals, but you actually get to interact with them. You don't, get to, hang out with, the other, like you said, Damian Knight or
you don't actually have a conversation with Lothvir. Lothvir simply shows up, looks at you, and you say, "Yes, sir."
Right.
There's that artifact we talked about. You can make a request or something, or have a conversation with him. But
do you have 1,000 silver pieces?
1,000 silver pieces? I do not.
That's like, 'cause then you could, go talk to Ice Wings.
But yeah, the Villiers family. Get to know them. Not that.
Or don't, and run screaming.
That music means we've come to the end. That really was a whirlwind tour of the history of Shadowrun from the perspective of this fat family, wasn't it?
It was a lot of fun. Thank you, guys. And I tried to speak slowly as I could to get it all in.
Oh, no. Thank you, sir, for the all of the info.
Yeah,
It took us
yeah.
a while to even find half of that.
Yeah, there's a ton there's a reason we wanted to have you on for this, and we specifically bumped the day that we were recording this show to the next day to accommodate your schedule so that we could have you on. There's definitely a reason.
You are terribly kind. But before we start going through the outro music, I will say 2 things I want to plug.
Yes.
One, If you listen to the year-end countdown with the Shadowcasters Network, you heard Opti announce the new actual play he's working on that I'm going to be a part of, and that Mr. Johnson will be running and game mastering. And so I'm excited about that and can't wait to tell you more, as that is something we can unveil. And also, please check out seizethegm.com and subscribe to our little podcast about GMing and seeing write-ups every week. And with that, I will turn it over to Cassie.
What are you plugging, Cassie?
Man, I got nothing. We've been playing Shadowrun still on the Emerald Grid Twitch channel. We also play a lot of D&D these days, and we launched a D&D West Marches game that we're gonna hopefully open to the public at some point. We're still getting there.
Yeah, awesome. We're Head Cases. I love to plug Head Cases, our Shadowrun Chronicles stream that we do on Twitch. Next one will be on this upcoming Thursday, but we do it every other Thursday opposite of this show. We're really getting in there. Speaking of Neonet, we're really digging into all the stuff that has been going down in the Boston lockdown. Pretty interesting stuff. Speaking of, again, also Miles Lanier, his name pops up in some correspondence you find, or, pieces of data you discover lying around in parts of Boston. So he's pretty big deal. Also, next episode, I always forget to talk about what the next episode is going to be, but today I remembered our next episode we're doing is on vehicles, drones, and riggers, and we're going to have rigger extraordinaire Damian Zidlow, host of the Violent Life podcast. He's going to be on here to talk to us about riggers and drones and vehicles and stuff. So if you're interested in that, riggers don't get enough love, I think, in the Shadowrun world in general. So way to give them their due. There's some definitely cool stuff you can do with them. If you want to contact us on the show, you can tweet us at 6worldpodcast. That's number 6worldpodcast. Email us at theshow@sixworldpodcast.com. Our website is sixworldpodcast.com. Our outro music is by Jimmy Nuclear or Johnny. I can't read today. Or ever. Our outro music is by Johnny Nuclear and the Meltdowns. Our logo artwork is by David McDermott, you can find his stuff at sixthworlddesigns.tumblr.com. He just did an amazing logo that I don't think has been unveiled yet or anything, but talking to people, I get to see things for Join the Anarchy. It's beautiful. It's amazing.
Yeah. He just did another one for me for the Emerald Cities. So good.
Yeah.
Talk to David for all your logo
David
work.
McDermott, sixworlddesigns.tumblr.com. I can't get enough of that guy. But anyway, from me, guys, stick around if you're listening live. We're about to do the after party. Don't leave. If you got questions, we'll talk about whatever. But for me and Cassie and our wonderful guest, Guard-a-Manger, thank you for joining us, and thank you for listening, everybody at home. Say bye, guys.
Bye.
World News Today.
That is not I haven't done that in a long time. Oh, I screwed it up again. There we go.
When the days have gone dark and the sky's turning gray, everybody in the world, they're just staying enslaved to technology's machines. We just feast for the screen, lost in reality, can't find peace in your dreams. Society sodomized by the lies and the greed, addicted to the tech corpse keeping us weak. We wheel and deal for them.
Back.